Hello, and welcome to the Sovereign Collective podcast, where we bring you real, raw truth for your self-empowerment. I'm your host, Sasha Calavoda, and I believe that you can stand on your own 2 feet, but that you don't have to do it alone. I love learning from people who continually strive to raise the bar, to go against mainstream thinking, and who dare to question the general consensus. People who risk being ridiculed or even risk the loss of their professional status as they bravely question the common narratives and challenge the rest of us to expand our minds and to reconsider what we think we already know. Join me in learning how to take control of your health and your mind so that you can have the energy to think more clearly and the confidence to step up and take responsibility for all aspects of your life. We promise to never censor here because I believe you are strong enough to hear the real, raw truth to make up your own mind. If you like what you find here at the Sovereign Collective podcast, then please share with your friends and family. And please also consider making a small donation on my Patreon page so that I can continue to bring you amazing content so that we can all create a better future. I so appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. And now, on to the show. Hi, everyone. It's Sasha Calavoda here with another episode of the Sovereign Collective podcast. I am with Takota Coen of Coen Farm, and we're going to bring you some more real, raw truth for your self-empowerment. Takota Coen is the co-owner of his family farm. And in 1988, his family recognized that they could no longer ignore the declining health of their farm, of the land, and of the animals on that farm. So they made a decision to stop using chemicals on that land and to restore the soil, to capture the water. And what has happened over the last 30 years on that land is amazing. You can go to his website, Coen, that's Coen farm.ca, and see an aerial drone video of the farm. And what's really interesting is there's a road, and then there's their farm, this beautiful, lush, amazing farm where you can see that things are just thriving. You just want to be there. And then on the other side is the complete opposite, right? It's basically what happens if you don't do what they're doing. So who is Takota? Takota is the co-author of Building Your Permaculture Property, a 5-step process to design and develop land. He's an educator with Verge Permaculture, and he's also the co-owner of Coen Farm, like I said, which is a 250-acre award-winning permaculture farm in Alberta, Canada. So thank you, Takota, for being here. I'm super stoked to learn from you. I myself am holding the vision more and more as every day goes on with the craziness in the world that I will be a part of this movement for my own self, because I really believe that what you're doing is necessary for the survival of all species on this planet and for the planet itself, if we want it to, unless it just decides to shrug us off because we've caused so much unnecessary harm. So I'm super stoked to learn from you today. So thank you for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure to be here, Sasha.
Thank you. So before we get into it, your award-winning farm, what did you win awards for? What's that for?
So this was back in, I think it was 2014. We won, it's called the Pollinator Stewardship Award. And we were actually working with I think he was what's the people who study bugs, entomologist, I think is the name. And we were trying to do a bunch of research, like how can we, this is right around the time of colony collapse disorder. Was big in the news, and so we were like trying to research how can we provide habitat on the farm for all kind of pollinators, including honeybees, and as a result of some of the work that we did there, we ended up getting nominated for this. I believe it was I think it's a North American award, and ended up winning it, and yeah, and there was just kind of a bunch of other little things, but that was one of the bigger ones.
Great. Nice. And yeah, we know that's pretty important to get the pollinators around, right? So yeah, awesome. So what was it like? So your parents were originally conventional farmers.
Yeah, like my dad grew up on the like a standard hogs in barns, cows in feedlots, herbicides and fertilizers on crops. And then he bought our land in 1986. He farmed kind of with his family, and but like my mom and my dad got married in like 87, and after a year of kind of seeing my mom she's like a hippie from BC, and she actually had an experience. She was pregnant with one of my sisters at the time, and she was going to give my dad lunch in the field, and he was on a tractor spraying. And by the time she got from the truck to the sprayer, and like he'd shut it off, but just as she's walking through the field, she started to feel lightheaded, and
Ugh.
she, she's very sensitive to chemicals like I am. And it was at that point where, like a lot of the like, just looking at the packaging and seeing like the skull and crossbones on it, and just like, well, hold on a second, we're spraying this and then we're going to eat it and we're going to feed it to our animals. So like there was a lot of like questions, but again, this is in the 80s. Like there was no internet at this time. There were no, like, I think we were the second farm in our county to transition to organics. And this was before I was even born. So it was years ago, and it was tough in those years, but thankfully, more and more people are kind of seeing the signs and are making the transition themselves from conventional to, or industrial to, organic agriculture, and thank goodness consumers are interested in it as well.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's organic, and then there's regenerative agriculture, which is a step, probably more than a step above organic. So
Yeah.
did they have regen ag in their mind? Did that concept exist back then? Did they just go organic? So let's talk about the difference between organic agriculture, regenerative agriculture, and what that means for the land and the animals.
Yeah. So I would say, like, the original kind of like the early adopters of organics, they were like just like the early adopters of regenerative agriculture. And sadly, since the the 80s, since when my parents, like we were certified for years, and we grew certified organic pigs for Sunworks, and which is one of Alberta's like largest organic farm. We used to grow grain for Sunny Boy cereal. We used to do organic hay to dairies, like small scale dairies and things like that, but there's no market for it. But sadly, over the years, the organic standard has been slowly kind of chipped away. And one of the reasons for that is because it's a brand, and like I think it's increasing at like 14% per year or something. So it's a pretty growing business. And
14% in size, cost, what, like just the
oh, so in like in like GDP or whatever you want to
okay,
call it.
okay, yeah.
Just the profit, I guess. And so as a result of that, it's attracted a lot of the people who aren't in it for kind of the principles and everything. They're just in it for the profits. And so the thing with organics is it's a standard, right? And so there's guidelines, but you as a producer can petition the certifying bodies to change what it constitutes to be certified organic. So for example, like when my parents first started, like you couldn't use anti-parasiticals on your cows, you couldn't use Roundup on your farm, you couldn't use things like that. Those are all now allowed on certified organic farms. Roundup, as long as it's not sprayed on the crop that's intended for sale. And in the United States, you can spray. I think it was just this year or last year. The producers petitioned the certifying body, saying, "Hey, we need to be able to spray Roundup inside our greenhouses to keep the weedy vegetation in the footpaths down," and they won.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so, or like, a lot of the vegetables grown in California are fertilized with raw human sewage. And it's certified, or you can use certified organic pesticides, which typically are like copper sulfate, or typically they're like heavy metals, but they're organic because that's what the standard is. But it can still come through the food. And so there's like when with the current standard, it's what's the word for it? I think it's driven by kind of like prescriptions as opposed to like outcomes.
Right.
And so people just do the bare minimum to check the boxes. And so the whole thing has been bastardized, and and it's increasingly becoming watered down every year, and people just petition to change the standards, and they vote. And so within a few years, I guarantee it'll be genetically modified organisms will be allowed as certified organic. Like things like CRISPR technology, which is a new form of genetic engineering that allows scientists to claim that they're so accurate at editing genomes, they can basically do it like on a single gene. And so they're saying, well, this is so good that it should be allowed to be organic. So this is the problem. And so now the response to this is, well, organics it's been co-opted, it's been greenwashed. We need a new standard. Let's now become certified regenerative.
Yeah, and then you get the certification and the regulation and all that crap,
Yeah,
right? And then you get
and it'll
people
do the
just
same thing. It'll attract market share. So big business will get involved, and the whole thing will get watered down. So in my opinion, organics and certification is a means to an end. Like the food system that we need to move to is a bioregional, seasonal, local system where certifiers are unnecessary, because the farmers that produce your food, and if they're shysters, you don't buy from them anymore, and there's no way for them to hide within the market and start another company somewhere else and rebrand all their stuff and keep doing it. Like there's I think it was a couple of years ago, there was a certified organic farmer in the United States who got caught selling tens of millions of dollars worth of genetically modified industrial soy and corn and wheat into the certified organic market, because he was just using his certifying or his certification as basically as a laundering system. So he would buy cheap grain from other farmers, give them like a 5% premium to keep them to shut up, and then he would sell it for the 300% premium that organics gets, and the whole market gets flooded. And so like me personally, it's like we're never going to out certify that kind of stuff. It comes down to like consumer education and I think bioregional food systems, and there's bioregional food systems is essential for a lot of other reasons as well, but that's a big one. Because even here in Alberta, like there's I know people that are they're good people, and this is probably the caveat to that, is like a lot of these farmers are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because of a lot of other factors. And I'm not condoning what they're doing. I'm having compassion for how difficult it is to be a farmer, and because I'm sure in their mind they're just thinking, well, if I don't cheat, it's the only way I can get ahead, and it's really shitty, the situations that we're getting into. And I know good people in Alberta who like a lot of my customers who buy from us, they tell me horror stories about some of the big names here in Alberta, and it's really sad because I know these people personally, and I know they're not bad people, but it's like, why why are you doing, why are you advertising that you do this? Or they'll kind of start out really good, and then 5 years later they just they stop they stop using organic grain, but everybody still thinks that they're organic, and it's like, no. they stopped that 5 years ago, and they just never bothered to tell anybody.
Right.
So
oh, it's too bad. Sellouts everywhere, right? There's just like supplement industry, the farm industry is kind of everywhere. There's just that's sad. It's because you go in there for the right reasons in the beginning, right? And you have these lofty ideals, and I guess they get eroded when, I don't know, if there's too many regulations or whatever, just to make a buck. And it's harder and harder these days.
Well, it is. But I do think a lot of it comes down to like our culture around like business, and particularly within farming, is like there's this stigma that like you can't you can't be profitable if you're a farmer, or like if especially if you're a regenerative farmer. It's like if you're making money, you're bad. But it's like money isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a tool, and in a lot of cases it's being used poorly. But if we as farmers kind of take all this shit on to ourselves, and we pigeonhole ourselves to the point where we can't do anything, and then we still have to pay, our mortgages and our taxes and our insurance, but we can't do it. It's like eventually you're going to hit the point where you will break, and it's like you're gonna, if the choice becomes between lying and feeding your kids, you're gonna lie. And so it's like we really need to be careful not to get to that point as farmers. And sadly, I see it all the time with people who are even in the regenerative farming industry, is that they don't have a kind of solid business background, and they burn out, and by that time they just don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so I've been really lucky to to be farming with my parents, and to have some of that breathing room. So I've been able to make mistakes and get to the point where I realized, like, what, if I can't do this profitably within the current context of what our society defines as its economic system, I'm not going to do it, because it's like, it's a race to the bottom. It's like there's all these people out there, like just burning themselves out, and wrecking the planet, and getting customers pissed off, and it's like nobody benefits. Like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So anyways, that was kind of a
No, but it's true. But Zach Bush talks about that, right? Where he talks about you have to let the ground lie. But once you start creating more, and once you start getting better quality stuff, you'll grow more per acre. So you'll have a greater productivity. You'll be able to charge more. But the more that there's demand, the more accessible it's going to be. But we have to demand this food, and we have to get out there and demand that people do this quality food. So then it becomes more accessible.
Yeah.
Because it's not such a unique product that you're the only, like as far as I know, you're the only regenerative agriculture farm in Alberta. Is that true? Or are there others?
I mean, there are others. Like I would, not to brag, but I think we are doing a lot of stuff that nobody else in Alberta is doing. But there's a lot of other fantastic farms who are doing other things as well.
Okay.
And it is growing. Like there's like so many of my like the funnily enough, like with this kind of lockdown stuff, people are, and like the toilet paper shortage, I think really got people realizing what would happen if this was something that actually mattered. And so, like, for the first time ever, like everybody I know is sold out. And they were sold out like months ago, which is fantastic, because like you said, like once demand increases, then it's going to incentivize more farmers to come in, and we can we can grow this thing, and we can get the efficiencies of scale and all those kinds of things. I'm definitely, as shitty as things are, there is so much hope, and I want to be really clear about that. But I also think it's important to call a spade, and because otherwise we're like we know where this ends. Like it's if we run out of topsoil, which they say there's 60 years left, or if we run out of biodiversity, which the background rate of extinction is like 100 to 200 or 300 times the standard kind of background levels. We're running out of water. Like if any one of those things runs out, like we're done.
We're toast.
And it's like we think wars over oil have been brutal. Like when there's food shortages and there's water shortages, like we don't want to get to that point. And we will. It is a matter of when, not if. And so, but that being said, I also know we can repair our water cycles. We can repair our soil health cycles. We can bring back biodiversity. We've done all these things on our farm. We have springs on our farm. There's a creek that we've created on our farm that didn't exist before in like 3 or 4 years. And knowing what I know now, it's like we could do it even faster now. And there's all these stories all around the world. So there's nothing to worry about. We need to, I think as a society, like reprioritize what's important to us, get these corrupt government and big business that are in bed with each other. Like a friend of mine says, like, we don't live in a free market capitalistic culture. We live in government funded corporate socialism. Mm-hmm. That's the current system. It's corporate socialism. And so like, if we got rid of that stuff, if big business and governments weren't subsidizing fake meat and industrial agriculture and GMO canola, that there would be, my food would be half the price of the garbage in the grocery stores. But even right now, we're getting closer to kind of neck and neck. But if they took away the subsidies, our food's actually cheaper. Wow. And that's without factoring in the externalities of increased, our on the health system, the increase on our water purifications for our cities, all those different things. Like there's no doubt that we can do this stuff.
Right. Absolutely. And I think it's a must. It's a must. So
Yep.
let's talk.
Yeah,
Okay. So we've got organic. The
Oh, yeah.
standard's been dropping. But from what I understand about organic farming, it has nothing to do with the outcomes. It has nothing to do with soil health. It has to do with, you can use this spray, but you can't use that spray, from what I've heard. It's nothing about rebuilding the soil. So what are the main elements of regenerative? Like, so what's the main goal of regenerative agriculture? What are the main elements of it? And what are your goals? Because I know, for one thing, it's the myth of, from what I understand, I think the myth of how long it takes to rebuild topsoil, it's not true. We can rebuild a lot faster. And like you said, regenerating waterways. And I think from your video on that video on your website, you're also talking about how your neighbors' wells are filling up because of what you're doing on the farm. I mean, this is massive. So what are the main things that you're looking for Regen Ag?
So the best way to look at that, and I've kind of given a bit of teaser to that, but it's like, if you look at agriculture as a whole, and the important thing to realize about agriculture is our society, our civilization is so advanced now, like we kind of take it for granted that without agriculture there is no civilization, because like if we don't have people who are good enough at growing a surplus of like our food, fibers, fuels, and kind of pharmaceuticals, which all come from the land. If we don't have people who can produce enough of a surplus that frees up other people to focus on other things, we don't have a civilization. So agriculture is really important for us to be having a Zoom call right now and that stuff. Okay. So what does agriculture depend upon, kind of base principles? Well, there's 4 ingredients. There's sunlight, there's water, there's soil, and there's organisms, plants and animals. Those are like the 4 fundamental. If you don't have those, and every single one of them is they're all interdependent and they're all essential. So if anyone's missing, you can't produce a crop, and no matter how good one is, you're always going to be limited by your kind of weakest ingredient. So like you could have the best topsoil in the world and you live in the sunniest climate and have all kinds of biodiversity, but if you don't have any water, you can't grow anything. And the same thing for any of those other ingredients. So for me, the regenerative agriculture is this idea of okay, those 4 ingredients, those are the kind of the energy and the materials that are required for this system of agriculture to operate. And so a regenerative system is one that increases, improves, renews, restores, something that it increases its own sources of energy and materials. That's what regenerative is. So it's creating more topsoil, more biodiversity. It's harvesting more, increasing the capacity of harvesting more sunlight, and it's increasing the amount of water that it's able to cycle and store. So now when we look at, okay, well, what about sustainable? Okay, a sustainable system is something that just maintains or sustains its own levels of own sources of energy materials. Okay, so we know that we've lost thousands of years of topsoil in the last 200 years. We know that we're losing biodiversity at a really rapid rate. We know that we're not harvesting solar energy as efficiently as we could, and we know that our aquifers are depleting. So can we just sustain the current system at that level? No, we can't. We have to increase it. And of course, the other system is what we're currently in, which is actually a degenerative system, which is one that destroys or eliminates its own sources of energy and materials. So like our entire agriculture right now is a degenerative system. It's cutting the branch that it's standing on, and everybody's talking, well, we need a sustainable agricultural system. It's like, no, we can't do sustainable. We need to have a regenerative system. And so that's kind of the main. So organics is really kind of this. It's really this. It was based on this idea of sustainable, about conservation, doing less bad, and it's really based upon this idea that humans are separate from the natural world, and that we're somehow bad, and that the best thing that we can do is just kind of do less bad, versus the degenerative system is based on this idea that humans are also separate from the natural world, but that we're above it. We're better than it. We were created in the image of God, and everything that flieth in the air or crawleth on the earth or swimmeth in the sea is under our dominion. It's like, and so what would you do if that's what you believed? Or is it more about stewardship? Is it dominion or stewardship? And so this regenerative agricultural movement is really based on the paradigm that humans are a part of the natural world, and we're not above or below it. We are connected. We're interdependent with everything else, and so our survival. We're not doing this to save the whales, or we're doing it to save ourselves. It's enlightened self-interest, and if we don't do it, we're screwed.
Enlightened.
And like once we kind of we get that home, it's a huge paradigm shift, and so that's like the main difference between, like, we started out with industrial agriculture, then we moved to like organic or sustainable agriculture. That's not working. We need to kind of advance and go through another paradigm shift, which is what this regenerative paradigm is all about.
How long has the idea of this paradigm been around? Because it's a term that I've only heard in the last couple of years, but I assume it's been around for longer than that for those that are more in tune with the agricultural world.
I don't actually know when it came up. Like, I think the first time I heard it would have been, it was after I got involved in permaculture, which was 2012. Because at that time, like, sustainable was like kind of like, it was the big thing.
Yeah.
And now, again, sadly, that's been greenwashed, and now actually anytime you see the word sustainable, it's actually like it's like Agenda 21 type stuff. Like,
Oh, but that's benevolent. Come on.
yeah,
Come on.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually don't know where it was coined, but it's a subtle difference. But you can just, like, for me, when I first heard it kind of described that way, it was just a huge shift. It was like, that's exactly, it was like, we're actually, you've heard the saying, it's like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so it's like we've set our sights on like such a low goal of like sustainable, and even if we were achieving that, which we're not, like, it wouldn't be enough. And so we need to reach higher. We need to get to this idea that we can regrow 1,000 years with the topsoil in a few years.
Right. We
Easily.
have to. We don't have
Yeah,
to.
and we have to. So we have no choice. But I also, like, a really important piece to say to drive this home is like, we have to, because we depend upon it.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, we need to save the whales and we need to save the rainforest, but we need to do that because without it we will die.
Yeah.
And there's like that's another subtle difference that I've kind of seen in a lot of like the like the conservation, or kind of the the hippie hippie movement, or the as some of my friends I've heard described as like butterfly catchers. What is it? Watermelon environmentalists, where they're green on the outside and red on the inside. Red meaning communist.
Wow.
And so when we really get past this idea of like self-interest as being more than just like self or ethics, like morality, doing the right thing is not about self-sacrifice. It's not about selfishness. it's like enlightened self-interest. It's realizing that like you can't pour from an empty cup. And coming back to what you kind of said in the introduction is like like humans are a keystone species on this planet. It's like, yes, we are destroying the planet. And, but one of the sayings in permaculture is like the problem is the solution. So we can be just as regenerative as we are destructive.
Absolutely.
And so if you look at it that way, like the healthier we are, the more profitable we are, the greater our well-being, the more capacity we have to give, and the better we're going to be at regenerating the ecosystems of the planet. And so it's kind of like, you know, the idea of it's kind of a shitty analogy now, but on an airplane, if you're crashing, you know, they say put your mask on first, right? It's kind of the same idea with this.
Right. Okay, cool.
Unless it's a cloth mask, then don't.
Right. There's a few comments I'm going to try to refrain from making comments because there's Agenda 2030 comments that I could make, but I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I don't guarantee it, but for now I'm not. One thing that stood out. So I just finished watching Kiss the Ground the other day. You know that. So, and one thing that which was interesting is watching their fight with predators. And so in your video, in your drone video, you talk about how this is the natural way that the land would want to be. It'd want to be a grassland. And so you don't fight that, you work with what it naturally wants to be. So another part of the natural way of things is predators. So what is the way to deal with predators in a way that fits the paradigm?
Absolutely. So really good question. And this actually kind of one of like a fundamental practice within kind of regenerative agriculture is this idea of like rotational grazing, you know, which is you know, typical, you know, livestock management for any, you know, grazing a ruminant animal like cattle or sheep or goats or something like that, or even pigs or chickens, is, you know, you keep them in like a barn or a fixed pen for a whole year, and they just go around and, you know, constantly eating grass and things like that. The problem with that is they you know, because their dinner plate is the same place that they sleep, it's the same place that they urinate, the same place they defecate. There's a lot of you know, parasite transmission, and so like historically, you know, going back, you know, before kind of colonization, before we had, you know, fences and things like that, you know, buffalo or you know, the wildebeest in Africa, all these animals, they rotated. And the reason they rotated was several. One is because if they didn't, they would get sick from parasites and die. But they would also, like, they were rotating around because they were being chased by predators. And so they had to kind of stay on the move and keep going. And there's a really great example of this in Yellowstone National Park, where there was a lot of you know, river and kind of riparian health degradation that was happening because they took all the wolves out, because, you know, predators are bad and they'll kill the deer, and so hunters didn't like them, and so they basically exterminated all the wolves. But then because there's no predators, the elk and the deer and the moose, they had nothing to run from, and so they gathered around like the best areas around the creeks, and they just destroyed the ecosystems. And so when they brought the wolves back in, they chased the animals back up on the hills and kind of kept them in order, and the ecosystem just bounced back. So predators, one of the principles in permaculture is every element serves some kind of a function, regardless of whether you understand it or you like it or not. So sadly, yes, mosquitoes serve some kind of a function. You know, wasps serve some kind of a function, even though I've seen like high-level scientific papers trying to prove that that if you could exterminate all mosquitoes, nothing bad would happen.
What about the bats? The bats eat the mosquitoes.
Exactly. It's just hubris.
Wasps,
that it's
I don't know. Wasps, I still am curious about the wasp, but mosquitoes for sure. They're a food group for some.
Yeah. And so the like with predators, like their role in the ecosystem is to kind of keep everything in balance, stop the populations from going too high or too low. And so like that's a pretty broad, you know, level understanding of like the role of predators and ecosystems. But when it comes to like our farm, like part of it is our strategy to be kind of dealing with predators. And in our area, we don't have a lot of them. Like coyotes and foxes are kind of and raptors are like our biggest predators.
Mhm.
And the way that we have dealt with them is we try to actually maximize habitat for them to kind of get their prey somewhere else. So I'll give you examples like a single nest of red-tailed hawks will eat up to 500 gophers, Richardson's ground squirrels, a year, as they're feeding their young. So like a gopher weighs like maybe a pound and a half, something like that, and a chicken weighs like 4 or 5 pounds. So it's like that would be like 100 chickens. That's how many
Wow.
chickens a hawk would have to eat to be able to kind of, if there are no gophers. And so one of the things that happens with agriculture is like we only see kind of one thing at a time, and because we're there's this saying by Chief Dan George, was like that which you don't understand you will fear, and that which you fear you will destroy. And so we see the gophers, and they're eating our crop, or they're making our fields bumpy. And so what do? We go in and we poison them, we shoot them, we trap them, and we eliminate them. But that sets off a chain reaction. So now there's nothing for the hawks to eat, and so the hawks start to eat our chickens, and then we get mad at them, and so we kill the hawks. But it's like, well, but now there's nothing to control the rabbits anymore either. And so, and
Mhm.
nature pours a vacuum, and so this thing keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And so, like, for example, with the coyote, there's a really great book by Dan Flores called Coyote America. And in this book, he kind of documents how over the last 200 years, the United States government has like murdered like hundreds of thousands of these coyotes every single year for 200 years.
Wow.
And the coyotes have done nothing but increase in number.
Wow.
So when Europeans got here, coyotes or coyotes were like they were like a kind of a no name, not even a big player in the scene. And I think they only lived in like the southern part of United States, in like Mexico, but despite all this pressure, because we killed all the wolves, the coyotes have expanded. And now there's established coyote packs in every single city in North America.
Yeah, we hear
And
them
so,
behind. I live on a dog park hill. We hear them in the middle of the night sometimes, right
yeah,
behind our house.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so like we're never gonna win. we're never gonna kill all the predators. So the idea is, as like farmers, is for us is like we try to realize that they serve a purpose, even if we don't understand it, that they serve a purpose, and we try to maintain, some kind of a balance. And so, like, for example, like if a fox comes into our yard, like the first time, I'll take a shot at it to scare it. And if it comes back again, I'll take a shot at it, and I'll sick my dog and like chase it away. And if it comes back again, like a third time, I have shot and killed foxes that come into the yard. And when that happens, and every time I've done this, the foxes that come in the yard multiple times, they're really sick. They have mange. They're desperate.
Oh,
And so, but versus otherwise, I see coyotes all the time out in our fields. They don't bother us. They're out hunting gophers, and
really?
they're awesome. Like I leave them alone. But if they kind of come in, so you can actually condition the animals to stay outside of your yard. Another really simple thing is like leaving tall trees on your farm so that hawks have a good place to perch, so that it's really easy for them to pick off the gophers out in the field versus coming after your chickens. Or one of the things that we've also do is we integrate our pigs and our chickens and our cows together in one system. And so, and since doing that, we haven't had a single fatality from hawks from doing that. Versus, before that, when they were like the chickens were located only like 100 meters away, we would have hawks, even though we had like aerial fencing, and so they would come down and kill chickens and rip their heads off and eat their brains.
Wow.
And because the chickens are now with our pigs and our cows, the hawks must be like afraid that they're terrified of the pigs or something, because they're bigger animals. So those are just some examples of how it's like really being humble and realizing that these animals, they serve a function, and to try to find a way to cohabitate with them, and just getting creative with some of this stuff, and it works. We haven't had any issues.
Cool. Nice. Okay. So another thing I know, which is big in regen ag, is the cover cropping and multiple cover crops. And that's something I'm curious how you do that, because when I've been on other town hall calls and learning about the cover cropping, but I can understand more southerly climates where you can grow other things at other times of year. But I would even like to apply that on my garden in my backyard. But once I harvest everything, what the heck can I plant in my garden to actually grow at that
Yeah.
stage? So how do you do cover cropping in colder environments? And if you could first explain cover cropping and why you want to do it in the first place.
Totally. So it's a really good question. And actually, before I describe cover cropping, I'm going to describe what's known as like the 5 principles of soil health.
Okay.
And so this is something that I believe it was Jay Fuhrer. He's an NRCS soil health guy in the United States, and guys like Gabe Brown who really kind of helped popularize it. But these 5 soil health principles are, number 1 is you want to minimize stress. So like that could be, mechanical tillage. It could be like, animal, grazing, or like trampling. It could be herbicides. It could be human foot traffic. It's like, if you want to have healthy soil, you don't want to eliminate stress, because just like, lifting weights, you actually need stress, a certain amount of stress in your system. It's like through hormesis, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so optimizing disturbance or optimizing stress, that's the first principle. The second principle is keeping the ground covered. And the reason you want to keep the ground covered is, the solar radiation has UV in it. UV sterilizes things, which means it kills them. And, we all know that, the soil is like, there's more organisms in a teaspoon of healthy soil than there are people on the planet. And so if that soil isn't covered with some kind of a mulch or a living plant, the sunlight can get at it and it sterilizes it and it kills it. The other reason you want to keep it covered is when rain falls on unprotected soil, it has a huge amount of force. It's basically like bullets hitting the soil. And if there's nothing to kind of, buffer that, whether it's a plant leaf that slows it down or some kind of a mulch it's like a shock absorber, the rain can actually pick up soil particles and it can create erosion, and you can lose a huge amount of topsoil. So we want to optimize disturbance, keep the soil covered. The third soil health principle is we want to keep a living root in the ground as long as possible. Ideally 365 if you can. And the reason for that is, as everybody knows, the photosynthetic process is the ability to take carbon dioxide and sunlight and turn it into sugar and oxygen. But as plants do that, the sugars that they're creating, more than half of the sugars that a plant produces, it doesn't use for itself. It dumps it into the soil through something called plant root exudates. And it's literally feeding those organisms in the soil around its roots, because they set up this kind of like stock exchange where the plant gives the microorganisms sugars, and then the organisms bring in minerals. They bring in nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, manganese, and things like that. And different organisms do different things, and the plant literally exchanges and sets up these networks with them. And so, but as it's doing that, that's what builds topsoil. That's how we get carbon out of the air and into the soil. Without a living root in the ground, you're not taking that carbon dioxide and using sunlight and dumping sugars, which is a carbon base, into the soil. So that's why you want to have a living root in the ground as long as possible, because if you're not optimizing that carbon capture, and you're not as productive as you could be. Fourth principle is you want to have a diversity of flora. So basically as many different kinds of plants as possible. And the reason for that is different plants do different things. There's tap-rooted plants, there's netted rooted plants, there's plants that cover the ground, there's plants that photosynthesize longer than others, there's plants that only have relationships with certain kinds of organisms. And so the greater the diversity of plants, the more solar energy you can capture, and the more minerals you can pull up from deeper down. Like an oak tree has a taproot that can go down like 100 feet into the ground.
Wow.
And every year when its leaves drops, it's dumping, minerals from deep down in the subsoils on the surface that other plants could not reach. So you want to have a diversity of flora, and the second one is you want to have a diversity of fauna, because animals also bring something into the system. They help speed up the breakdown of plant material, which increases, so that plants aren't building up and oxidizing, which basically means they're not decomposing. They're actually literally rusting, and the minerals are kind of just going off in the air and being vaporized. So those principles again are, we want to optimize disturbance. We want to keep the ground covered. We want to keep a living root in the ground as long as possible. We want to have a diversity of flora and diversity of fauna. Cover crops do all four of those. The only one that they don't do is they don't bring in a bunch of animals.
Right.
Because if you've got a cover crop, you're actually, and actually before I do that, a cover crop is literally just a bunch of different plants. Sometimes they're called cocktail cover crops. It can be, anywhere from 2 or 3 to 20 different species of plants that all do different things that you're planting to optimize disturbance, to keep the ground covered, to capture solar energy by having a living root in the ground as long as possible, and having as many different kinds of plants as you can. And when you do that, plus bringing in animals, that's how you regenerate soil, is by following those 5 soil health principles. And as I said, that's cover crops do all 4 of those.
Wow.
Things really well. So another way to think about this is something called the successional cycle, which is this idea that plant communities or a community of organisms goes from like pioneer organisms, which are like really tough and hardy, and they're the first organisms that come on after some kind of a massive disturbance event, like a fire or a flood or a volcano. The first ones are the pioneers. They're thorny, they're aggressive, they can live under really harsh conditions. But then as those organisms progress, they gradually get more and more diverse. They're longer lived. They're not as aggressive anymore. They tend to get larger until you get to what's known as a climax ecosystem. And so that process, depending on where you are in the world, from like disturbance to climax ecosystem, can take decades to centuries. But the idea is like the first organisms, the plants that come up, they're like annual plants. They grow really fast, they produce a ton of seed, and they grow more of themselves, and they generate biomass, they cover the soil, they do all those things. But then the next guys come up and they're like biennials. They live for 2 years, and then you get your perennials, and then they get longer and longer lived. So with cover crops, it's this idea that you can compress ecological or successional time from 10 years with the plants, what would happen naturally, and you can do it in 1 year. Because you can plant annuals, you can plant biennials, you can plant perennials, you can plant taproot species, you can plant all those different guys. And normally in a normal ecosystem, they would take 10, 15 years for their natural germination conditions to be reached in the soil, or for birds to fly in and drop them. You can just do it all in one, and you can take that, you can fast track that the ecological succession, getting us closer to a climax ecosystem. So that's the big driver behind cover crops. So in terms of what you can do is a really simple thing in your garden. One of the ones that I recommend for folks is, particularly in cold climates, is something called crimson clover.
Okay.
So it's an annual clover, meaning it grows, flowers, and produces seed in the first year, then it dies, and it won't come back. And so what I do in my gardens is, typically in like, kind of late July, early August, when everything is full grown in your garden, you can just literally just broadcast like a good little grass seeder, one of those, Scott's kind of lawn seeders. And in like my garden's 10,000 square feet, and you would put on, what would it be, like a quarter pound or something. It's a tiny amount.
10,000 square feet, a quarter pound?
That's well, Yeah, like typically you'd put on, would it be like, 4 or 5 pounds to the acre. And so there's,
Okay.
say if it was 4 pounds to the acre, there's 40,000 square feet roughly in an acre.
Okay.
So about a quarter pound in
Right.
10,000 square feet, which is like that's a typical size garden, or at least for,
Not for
um,
me.
that'd be like a quarter acre garden. But even you could do it even less than that. But just that's like the idea of the seed rate, and you broadcast it on the surface, and like that's like minimum. You could just do that no matter what if you got bare soil. Ideally, you do like a little bit of mulch, or you'd like
I like
irrigate right
mulch.
afterwards.
Yeah.
And because like everything in your garden's full grown, or is almost full grown, by the cover crop will start to germinate, and by the time you start harvesting your crops, later in the end of August, early September, the cover crop will already be kind of 6 or 7 inches tall, and it's not
Wow.
competing with anything you're doing, but it's called interplanting. And it's a really simple technique, and this crimson clover fixes like 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre,
Wow.
which like that's enough nitrogen to produce any crop, well, apart from like corn or something like that. But even then, if you've got decent soil on it, that'll be enough to grow it kind of any crop you'd want. But it also produces a ton of biomass, and it has really beautiful flowers and things like that. But it also, in our climate, it doesn't reseed itself. Even when it
It
flowers,
doesn't
it won't.
reseed.
It
Okay.
doesn't reseed itself because
Oh,
it's a tropical plant.
no.
And so I've been using it for years. I've never had it over winter, even though it flowers. It's these beautiful, like, it's called crimson clover because it's like
Yeah, yeah,
dark,
yeah.
dark red. It's like blood red flowers are beautiful.
Wow.
So that's by far the simplest cover crop that you can put
And
in your
just
garden.
one plant, that's okay. You don't have to have a diversity of
I mean, ideally you would go more, but it gets more complicated the kind of the more diverse you get. And so I actually have a video on my YouTube channel that shows like the kind of like master level of cover cropping that you can get, where I actually like I'll plant 10, 15 things in my garden, like kind of like we plant our garden typically May 15th, and so like on May 1st or even earlier, I'll till my garden and plant my all this cover crop everywhere in my garden, and then it germinates, and it's about 4 or 5 inches tall by the time May 15th comes along, and then I actually rototill strips
Oh, wow.
kind of where I want to plant, and then I've got cover crop basically my footpaths, and then I actually scythe it with a little scythe all summer long, and I'll get 4, 5, 6 cuts out of this cover crop that I can use as mulch from. If you really want to fast track soil health,
Yeah.
because again, like you can like most plants, they grow once and they die, and that's 1 year. With cover crops, if you cut them, you can do like 3, 4, 5 years worth of biomass production in a single year.
And then
And
you put that and you put the mulch where? You clip it and then it goes into your
it,
garden? Just
it could stay on your footpaths,
okay.
or it could I actually use it to mulch like my garden crops once they get big enough. So like basically my footpaths are like 20, 30 inches wide or something like that, and I just scythe on either way, and then rake them back around my my carrots or my onions or whatever it is. And I've got a really good video about
Okay. I'm gonna
it's
watch
called
that.
like how we use cover crops in our garden, and it goes through like every single step,
Cool.
from
Okay.
like how I till, how I seed, the different kinds of seed, the ratios that I use, how I scythe it, and then it shows it like in the growing season. And like, so like to put this in perspective, that the garden that you see there, I've got another video that talks about, like, I actually have a soil health test that anybody can do with nothing more than a shovel and their eyes, and like how you can like look for metrics that to prove whether or not your soil is kind of going up or going down.
Mhm.
And the place where I do that garden would be 10 years ago. That garden was like pure clay because we moved onto this yard site, and so like there was hunks, watermelon sized clods of clay in this garden. And now it's like you can't find clay. I can dig down 2 feet and there is no clay.
Wow.
We've turned it into topsoil
Right.
with nothing more than cover crops, and the fifth principle, which is like livestock manure or compost.
Right.
When you do those with those two things, like cover crops and some kind of a livestock manure or compost, it's like you can repair any kind of, you can turn sand, pure sand, into amazing soil, or you can turn pure clay into amazing soil. It's the same process.
So you actually till your soil.
I do, which is
Okay, so I'd like to learn about that because I am under the impression that we don't want to till. It's about no till, no spray, no like. So
yeah.
tell me about the tilling.
So and this kind of comes back to this kind of sustainable paradigm of like nature is delicate and like we don't want to hurt it, and it's like there's this kind of thing going around right now saying that Earth is in the sixth mass extinction event,
Yeah.
right? And it's true. Like the based on the research I've seen, like a mass extinction event is something where at least 50% of the species, not just like the numbers, but 50% of all species on the planet at that time have gone extinct. That's happened at least 5 times, and apparently it's happening right now. So that is like incredibly hopeful for 2 reasons. One is because, well, the planet's already gone extinct 5 times before, and it keeps coming back. It's been hit by asteroids, it's been hit by super volcanoes, it's been hit by pole reversals, it's been hit by algae sucking all the oxygen out of the air when they die, and upwards of like 90% of all the species just dying overnight. But fast forward a million years through that successional cycle, and we have the ecosystems that we're looking at today. At one point, this planet didn't even exist. So the Earth is anti-fragile. It actually, up to a certain amount of disturbance, it actually speeds things up. And even with a catastrophic amount of disturbance, it still comes back. And so with tillage, the way to think about it is like it's like lifting weights. Like if you go and you lift 1,000, or like if you go and you lift like the heaviest weight you can lift, whatever it's 200, 300 pounds for your deadlift, and you do 1,000 reps of that, you'll wreck yourself. But if you lift, it's the heaviest thing you can lift, 2 or 3 times, and then you wait 3 or 4 days, and then you lift the heaviest thing you can lift, that's how you can build muscle. And so disturbance is the same thing. When the buffalo, the settlers described, early settlers in North America, they described herds of buffalo that would pass in front of a wagon train for 3 days and 3 nights. And by the time they were gone, the land was a moonscape. Like it was completely black. Or there's stories of passenger pigeons, which I think there's like 7 billion passenger pigeons in North America when the settlers got here. Now they're extinct. But when those passenger pigeons would fly through the sky, they would literally blot out the sun.
Right.
And when they would rest in a forest overnight, the weight of the birds would tear the limbs off of trees. They were so heavy.
Wow.
And in the morning, there'd be a foot of pigeon shit on the ground.
Yeah.
And so like the nature has evolved with these intensive disturbance events and then long rest periods to recover. That's actually how you can really fast track things. So I use tillage in the same way that weightlifters lift weights. I come in, I do the most amount of disturbance I possibly can for the shortest period of time, and then I give it a long recovery. And so I actually use, like, there's a saying, death feeds life. It's literally true. I come in and I create a massive disturbance event, and I kill earthworms, and I break up mycorrhizal fungi and all these different things, and it releases huge amounts of nutrients, but I don't kill all of them. And I don't do it for 10,000 acres. I do it on 10,000 square feet. And there's enough of an area around it that it can recolonize the soil, and it feeds off that life, and it creates this explosion of productivity in my garden. And then I don't do any tillage for a year.
Right.
And I don't have weed problems. I don't most years I don't even irrigate, and this is in our climate. And like, I don't know if you watch some of my YouTube videos, like we're growing 5-gallon buckets out of a single potato hill. We've got we've got beets that are like bigger than my head, or kohlrabi bigger than my head. It works. And so that this, sadly, there's this myth about tillage is bad, and it's like, it depends, because if you don't have some kind of a disturbance event, the ecosystem, like your garden, will just turn into a forest. Like, you have to have, whether you're using mulch or you're using, herbicide, or you're using tillage, something needs to keep that ecosystem from expanding through onto its perennial stage and on into a forest. And so I use tillage because it's super simple, and annual plants are adapted to tillage. And it's actually funny, a lot of the like the whole no-till agriculture, which is purely just this a thing to sell farmers herbicides. Um, Now it's failing now, and they're coming with all kinds of problems, and farmers are going back to tilling again.
Really? Because that bush talks a lot about the tilling. And I stopped tilling because I thought there's supposed to be like a layered aspect to the soil, and there's different life and different layers. So what I started doing is just I mulch everything,
Yeah,
and I just try to, and then I just dig where I need to dig, like digging up
yeah,
stuff or but
and you can do that. Like the mulch is the kind of disturbance event, and on a small scale, you can totally do that. But like when like another really, probably one of the best kind of justifications for tillage is reading settler accounts of how Indigenous people managed land. It's like for in the in Australia, they had thousands of acres of something called yam daisy that the Indigenous people had literally planted and tended for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. And when the settlers got there, they described scenes of lines of women, stretched as far as the eye could see, going through these pastures with these digging sticks, and they would flip over the soil and keep it nice and aerated. And they described the topsoil as this like light, fluffy stuff. Or the Indigenous people here in North America used fire, was one of the things they used for disturbance.
wait. That's
To
what I think my parents did in Europe too. I think they lit fires. I
Yeah,
think that was a common thing to be
yeah.
doing. Yeah.
And there are problems with it all kind of comes down to context. Is like in certain situations, like having too much tillage is not a good thing. Having too much fire is not a good thing. Having too much mulch can be a bad thing in certain, like, for example, say you lived in the north or the west coast, and you have a really really wet climate. Using a lot of mulch there it'll destroy you because it's like slug habitat. And
Well, okay, that's happening to me.
yeah,
I'm getting lots of slugs. I need ducks. I have lots of slugs, and so you think that's coming from the mulch, huh? That's
for
interesting.
sure, because it's keeping it wet all the time. And so, and like I've overdone it in my garden with mulch too, because like if the ground always stays wet, the vegetables aren't used to that, and they'll go moldy. The onions will rot in the ground, or you'll get mildew and stuff. And so I've actually come back to, I've kind of gone the whole full circle. Like I was like, tillage is totally bad. It's we don't want to do that. And now I've come back. It's like, no, it's a tool, and when it's used properly,
Right. Okay.
um, and it's super effective.
Right.
And
Okay.
you can, like my mom raised 6 kids, like purely out of her own garden, and she used a full tillage system. And I'm not saying it's like that's not right, that's not good, where you're tilling like once a week and you're keeping the soil black. That's where I have
Oh,
a
wow.
problem with.
Right.
But on a small scale, I think it's a fantastic tool.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Okay, so one other thing that I want to talk about is, let's talk about all the sectors that would be affected positively through the use through the not the use but through the adoption of regenerative agriculture on a larger scale. Like what I always tell people, and I love what you say in your video, is eat the change you want to see in the world, because that's what I tell people so much. Like, so my background is nutrition,
Yeah.
and I always talk about, like, you change what you eat, you support different businesses, you change your mental and physical capacity, you support your local farmers, and you change your local economy. Like, there's so many aspects that just that one habit can
Mhm.
change on a massive scale. So let's talk about that. What are the changes that you see that would come out of expanding the regenerative agriculture movement and practice?
Oh, I mean, it's like I don't think, everything. It's like it'd probably be a shorter list to just say what wouldn't be affected by it. Because again, like coming back to what I said earlier, is this idea that like without agriculture, there is no civilization. And so like if we want to have a regenerative, anti-fragile civilization, our agriculture has to be that first. And so, but I mean, like, just to riff off some of the things that you've mentioned, it's like there's personal health. It's like by eating this way, it literally, your body has the ability to heal itself. Just like an ecosystem can heal itself, your body can too. What is it? Within 5 to 7 years, every cell in your body has been regenerated. Like, you're not the same person anymore. And part of that regeneration process is governed by the vitamins and minerals that you're consuming, and that comes through your food. So by eating healthier food that has more vitamins and minerals, your body has the ability to better repair itself. And so then it's like, if that affects your mental health, then it scales up to our communities. Our communities are more resilient. We're not having massive suicides. We're not having crippling illnesses that make a greater percentage of the population dependent upon healthcare. It would scale up to there'd be less wars, because when their well-being increases, like, going around killing people isn't I'm sure it's not a particularly fun thing to do. and and so, like, if we're healthy, like, all wars in the past have been over resources. And so, like, if we're not living in the scarcity mindset, we wouldn't need to have wars anymore. And I mean, so it's like the whole thing, it's everything. If we adopted this regenerative agriculture, it's an unlimited and, like, unknowable amount of well-being is what we stand to gain. And if we don't, we're not going to be here. Like, again, coming back to this mass extinction event, like, how many civilizations have gone extinct? Like, it's the hubris that we think that we've been here for. Our current kind of Western civilization is a few hundred years old. And like, there have been civilization like Jared Diamond's book Collapse. He studied the Greenland Norse, the Anasazi, the Pitcairn Islanders, the Easter Islanders, and the Mayas. And those are 5 civilizations that some of them had lived for several hundred years. Some of them had lived for several thousand years. And as a result of the way they were interacting with their environment, primarily it was environmental degradation was the main thing, and their refusal to change when they saw that something was happening to their environment. And there was other factors, but those are the 2 main ones. That was the driving cause of the collapse of these empires, and or at least civilizations. And so that can't happen to us. It's happened in the past, and the planet will be fine. Just like it's been gone extinct at least 5 times in the past. It's going to come back, and it's going to come back even better than before, like it has always done. There's ecosystems are always complexing. It's just we might not be here on the next iteration. And so this really comes down to is like do we want to stay here? Do we want to continue living on this planet? And I do. This is like, despite all the shittiness in the world right now, it's like there's still so much abundance and beauty in the world, and humans have so much to contribute to that. Like, we're not just kind of we're not just these parasites. We are keystone species. We're like those wolves in the Yellowstone Park. We can be that organism that helps all the organisms to flourish.
Right. Yeah. I don't think we've ever fully explored how abundantly and lightly at the same time we can tread on this planet. We have a history of pillage and plunder, and we don't learn from history. It's apparent in all sorts of ways. We don't learn. We don't learn from fallen civilizations. We don't learn from past war crimes. We don't learn from, the Dust Bowls. Like, we don't learn. We just keep repeating the same ridiculous mistakes over and over again. Yeah. So, and another thing, what I is also supporting the big ag and big pharma, which have gone together, right? Like, that's also another thing that you won't support, and that will lead to we allowed those megacorps to be in existence, and we also have the power to remove them if we stop supporting them. So there's all these environmentalists out there, instituting these carbon or saying we have to do this and that for the environment, but just change what's in your pantry. change
Yeah.
what's
And
covered.
that's,
And
they
then
the
boom.
way. Yeah. And that's what I love about like permaculture as a philosophy is not about pointing the finger at somebody else. It's about looking in the mirror and realizing it's like that you're
Oh,
part of the problem, and the way to start is with yourself. It's in your own backyard, producing your own food and taking responsibility for your own needs, and then and kind of scaling that out. And when we do that, like you said, the world's largest agricultural company, Monsanto, and the world's largest pharmaceutical company just became one a couple
right.
of years ago. And like if there's one thing, and I know Zach Bush talks a lot about this, but like one of the big kind of the kind of sword of Damocles that's like just dangling by a thread over our heads right now is glyphosate or Roundup. This is the world's most prevalent herbicide. Over, I believe it's 14 million kilograms of this herbicide are applied globally every year, and it's increasing.
Million or billion?
Billion, B with a B.
Billion with a B. Yeah.
And the current, if you look at the MSDS safety sheet on glyphosate or Roundup, the lethal dose for an adult human is half a liter, half a kilogram. And so we're literally applying like enough glyphosate to kill every living human on this planet several times over every single year. Glyphosate has a half-life of 25 years in the soil. It is patented as a pipe cleaner. It chelates minerals. It binds minerals in the soil and in industrial pipes. That's where it was first designed. It is an antibiotic. It's patented as an antibiotic. It's patented as a herbicide, which is what it's typically being used on. That's why it's so prevalent. But it's also patented as a biocide, literally as something that kills all life. And so it's like, and that was the same company that created DDT and Agent Orange and PCBs and dioxin and aspartame. The same company that created those things, Monsanto, also created or holds the patent for this chemical. And so if you don't like that, if you don't like feeling sick, if you don't like your gastrointestinal problems, and there's a direct correlation between the glyphosate and leaky gut and all these these inflammation diseases. If you don't like the cancer that's running rampant in our societies right now, or the dementia, as Zach Bush has shown, there's a correlation between Roundup and dementia. Like, we need to stop that. Like, if you're buying food in the grocery store that is cheap, that's what makes it cheap. That's what allows farmers to farm 30,000 acres and just apply one thing, and it kills everything. It's really difficult. It takes a lot of time and care to manage, even a few hundred acres. And that means that we need to go from 2 or 3% of the population as farmers right now back to 30%, which is what it was in the 1930s. Because we need to value the skill and the time and the effort that goes into that. I think as a nation, Canada pays some of the lowest prices for food in terms of their total earnings of any other culture on the planet. I'm not saying that like this is not just about money here. Like we also need to redefine our entire economic system and move away from a fiat currency and stuff like that. But like food is absolutely essential, as you said, and it would have massive sweeping changes. And sadly, and this is probably one of the biggest reasons why food is so important now, is it's clear now that food is like the last frontier for control. It's like we look at the fake meats, the milk that is being synthesized from human DNA, and the
I don't even know about that. Oh,
oh,
really?
it's getting bad. Like it is apparently it's like the fastest growing industry, despite the fact that nobody wants to eat it, because all the governments are just pumping money. Like our government in it was Canada, Alberta, it was like $150 million grant to build some fake burger plant down in Calgary or something, or and so the
It's like the Beyond Meat burgers. I
Yes,
always
and
wondered about that Beyond Meat. It's like, you look at, it's in all the health food stores. I'm like, who the hell is backing this? This is not real food. This is not a veggie burger. This is
no,
disgusting what is in here.
no.
There's something behind that.
Yeah, and all that stuff is it's like every the if you're not like as bad as organics is, at least, and like yes they are using Roundup like in certain places on organic farms, but they're not applying it directly to the seed crop, like the wheat or the barley or the peas. They're not applying it like a week before harvest.
Right.
And this is the main difference. Like farmers have been using herbicides for 100 years on their crops, and I'm not condoning that. We need to get away from that, but the big change that happened, I think, was in the 1990s, was they started using it as a desiccant, which basically, as opposed to swathing these crops and then letting them dry in those windrows in the fields,
Yeah.
farmers would now just go through a field and spray this Roundup on the crop, kill it while it was standing, which allowed it to dry faster, and it also pulls moisture out because it's a chelator. But the thing is, like, now that Roundup wasn't being used to kill weeds, it was being used to kill the plant itself. And there hasn't been as much time. There hasn't been rain to wash it off. It's in the seed. And this is fascinating. If you grow barley for beer, like malt barley, you have to sign a contract, an affidavit swearing that you did not use Roundup as a desiccant, because Roundup inhibits germination. It actually makes the seed sterile. And if you want to grow beer, it has to go through the malting process. It has to sprout. And so basically, there's two things: drink beer, even if it's not organic, because at least it doesn't have Roundup on it. But two is, like, basically everything else, if it's not organic, it's more than likely been desiccated with Roundup.
Yeah.
I know lots of friends who they have terrible gluten insensitivities. They go to Europe, where Roundup has been banned for a few years. They can eat pastries like nobody's business.
Yeah.
And yet, like, sourdough has an effect on that as well. But so it's like, what percentage of the population in Canada has some kind of a gastrointestinal disease?
Oh, massive. I mean, that's what I work with. I work in nutrition. It's what I talk about all day long, constantly. It's absolutely, I would say, more do than don't by far.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ugh, crazy what we're doing to ourselves. And we voluntarily do this stuff. So,
Yeah.
the people that care about the environment, you got to look what's in your cupboard. It's not just about everything out there, and it's not about all this green technology or whatever. It's actually what you're actually eating. It comes down to basics, right? And where are you buying it from, and who are you supporting? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's what's terrifying, is like, if this whole Impossible Burger stuff, and the plant-based foods agendas, which are being just propagated, like, I don't, if I have to sit through another, I speak at a lot of conferences and stuff like agriculture, and like the and like the climate change or global warming is one of the hot topics, and I don't want to get into that, because I think it's it's the climate's always been changing, and there's pretty clear evidence that CO2 is actually a lag factor, or a temperature is a lead factor to CO2 and different things like that. But the way that the problem is carbon, and the solution that's being proposed is, well, grazing animals, which have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, they're the problem.
Right.
The fact that there was 100 million bison in North America, and now there's like 120 million beef. Right. But now the beef are the problem. It's utterly ridiculous. But there's like PhD level scientists that are talking about how livestock are the biggest contributor to, and part of it's because they're in feedlots and things like that.
Yeah, factory farming.
Yeah, but the solution is, we need to go plant-based. Right. So, how are we going to grow all these crops? Well, it's going to be no-till, genetic modification, and we're going to turn these peas and soybeans into fake meats. And so, like these environmentalists, which they're well-meaning, and because there are problems in the world right now, there are environmental problems that need to be addressed. But if we don't look at the big picture and realize that like, there are psychopaths and kind of foxes guarding the hen house right now, that have that have been and and continue or will continue to take advantage of us if we're not educated.
Yeah.
It's going to get real bad.
I mean, Agenda 2030, right? One of the agendas is no natural food by 2030. And I heard in another interview that that's been moved up to 2025.
Yeah. Well,
So,
they're talking about a meat tax in the UK right now,
oh my goodness.
as well as a carbon tax, and so like, but like there's other things with the mass hysteria that is happening right now with our misunderstanding of the germ theory and stuff like that. Is very soon all it would take is for some kind of a swine flu or a avian
Right.
flu or whatever, and now, well, it's these little farmers, it's the wet markets in China where they're eating these wild animals. This is why we have to have hermetically sealed barns, and the chickens have to be fed antibiotics, and it has to be all controlled and scientific. It's these small farmers are little factories for all these diseases. It's not safe, and
Completely the opposite.
it's a hop, skip, and a jump until
Oh,
it's illegal, either bureaucratically or literally illegal for people like us to do what we're doing. And so like right now, 2 or 3% of the population in Canada is farmers. Of that, a fraction of that population thinks like I do. They're the average size farm is like 1,200 acres, and it's full chemical. So like the change isn't going to happen from the farmers. There's not like a tenth or 100th of a percent isn't enough to create a paradigm shift within a culture. This is going to come from consumers, but all it takes is it's 3 or 4% of the population to demand and to refuse to put up with this crap anymore, and things will shift. And we'll continue to see, as demand increases, supply will increase to meet that demand. A lot of the farmers that I know that are fully industrial, they don't like what they're doing. They're trapped. They've got mortgages. And if you've got a mortgage, you have to have insurance. And if you have crop insurance, and if you have crop insurance, you have to spray this stuff. You have to use Roundup. You have to use fungicides. You have to use their brand of seed. They're slaves. We live in basically a feudal agricultural system right now. It's not necessarily the farmer's fault. So as consumers, we have a lot more free time. You have a lot more free time than farmers do. You have a lot more disposable income than farmers, and that's where that shift is going to come from. And so it's fantastic that you're doing this podcast, and I really appreciate having me on to talk about some of this stuff, because it's super complex, and it's important. If we get this wrong, like, we're done. Civilization's over.
yeah, not a lot of wiggle room. Not a lot. Okay, I have one last question quickly. So, what about people like me? Like, finally, my husband said the other day, finally, he's like, I want to farm. I'm like, what? Because I've been talking about, I want to get out of the city. I want to get some land. I want to do this. I want to do this. But okay, so how does one do this? How does one make the switch? Like, how do you not bite off more than you can chew? And like, any tips for the eager new farmer?
So there's the good thing about not having any farming experience is that you don't have any bad habits.
Okay.
So that's the good thing. The bad news is that there's the way that I describe it is like people who like, they've watched a lot of videos about like farming, and like they've read, all Joel Salatin's books and things like that. And they're super pumped and they want to go farm.
Yeah.
And they think they can do it. They can just, quit their job and like, start a farm right away and just be profitable within the first year. So like that would be the same logic as somebody who watched all of the seasons of Grey's Anatomy and maybe, some of the seasons of ER or whatever like that, and thinking that you could become a brain surgeon. Like it's literally that complex. And so there's it's totally doable, but there's the saying that it takes 10,000 hours to become a master of something.
Right.
And farming is like farming, especially the regenerative system, is a multidisciplinary, because you need to learn crops, pasture, livestock. You need to learn how to be a mechanic. how to weld, how to be a carpenter, how to be a veterinarian, and how to be an accountant. And I mean, if you're already a small business owner, you can there are a lot of crossover skills to this. And actually, as a somebody in nutrition, you'll be light years ahead of a lot of other farmers, because like the same principles in human health transfer into animal health. And so the good news is like 90% of the shit that if you get a book like on how to keep bees,
Right.
10 pages is about how to keep bees, and the last 90 pages of a 100-page book is how to treat them for all the diseases that they have.
Yeah.
But it's like if you just support their health, they don't have
Right.
diseases.
Right. Yeah.
So the tip that I give people is like, don't quit your job right away. Like, find a way to transition into it. It'll take minimum 5 years before you're even before you even break even. And the other thing would be like, try to find some kind of a if you're going to move into like a farming community, like find a mentor, or if it's possible to woof on certain farms, or be a willing willing worker on organic farms, or take apprenticeships or things like that on other farms, so that you can learn from other people's mistakes before you start your own. And then just but I've also heard other people who just like they quit everything and they just jump in with both feet, and they make a ton of mistakes, and they get there. But it's like most people are either short on time or money. And so it's like, if you have money and you can afford to make some $10,000-$20,000 mistakes, which you will make, you will make, and I've made them, then yeah, you can jump in with both feet. But if you don't, it'll take, what's the saying? It can be fast, cheap, or good. And it's like, and you can only pick two of those. And like farming is no different. So that's kind of the sad thing. However, like I said, you don't have a lot of the bad habits and things like that the current industrial agricultural system has. And I know people that have moved from the city and with zero farming experience, and they're running some of the best regenerative farms that I know of.
Oh, amazing.
But they had financial help. They had and they had the time to kind of make the mistakes, and they allowed themselves that kind of 5-year grace period.
Yeah. Cool. We also watched The Biggest Little Farm. Well, finished watching it the other day.
Yeah.
And that was like 7 years of hardships and crazy things. And their mentor had said that it takes 7 years to build that ecosystem where everything really starts working together. I thought that was interesting. That's a long time when you're
easily. But the really exciting thing is like it like when it's like we're seeing this on our farm now, and I've heard other people say it's like that kind of 5 to 7 year period. And at a certain point, like you hit like a threshold in the ecosystem, something just like clicks.
Yeah.
And at that point, it just becomes effort. Like you can throw a tree in the ground and it grows. You can throw seed anywhere and it just pops out of the ground. Animals start coming, like and it becomes exponential. It's just it's slow, but it's tough to get to that point.
Right.
But it makes it that much more worthwhile.
Oh, absolutely.
And like put it this in other ways, like, okay, well, it would take 7 years to fix everything. Like we talked about how agriculture is like it's the root, or it would solve so many problems. So 7 years, 7 years,
yeah,
and we could fix every problem on the planet.
Imagine. Worth it. It's worth it. Absolutely. Okay, awesome, Takota. So how can people find out about you? You got your website, coenfarm.ca.
Yeah, that's the best place. All the links to, like, I've got my own podcast. There's a book coming out in a few months. I've got a YouTube channel. We've got a newsletter. All the stuff. I do blogs and things like that. It's all linked to from the coenfarm.ca.
Awesome. And for people that are in the area, they can come to your farm for a tour.
We do like one private tour, or sorry, one free kind of open farm tour a year that people can come to. I have had to start to charge for tours just because I put so much, like it takes 5 hours to show people around. And so what I do is I charge my hourly consulting rate. You can bring as many people as you want, and you can split the cost however you want. And I'll show you around the farm, and that can be scheduled at any time. So yeah, we have a free farm tour on the Saturday closest to the solstice, the summer solstice. So like this year it's coming up. I think it's the 21st this year, whatever that Saturday is.
The winter solstice, you're saying? Or
Sorry,
the
summer solstice. Yeah.
Okay, the summer solstice. Yeah. Okay, I was gonna say, oh, it's coming up. Okay.
It's like June 19th or 20th or 21st.
Okay.
One of those days. And the details are on the website there. Hopefully, I'm going to push my parents this year. If there's still lockdowns, we're going to do it civil disobedience style. But that we did actually have to skip. This is the first year in like 7 years we did have a farm tour this year.
Wow. Because with the new restrictions that came out today, they say you don't have to wear masks on farms. Hey, there's
really? There you go.
Yeah, really. Okay. Well, awesome, Takota. I super appreciate your time. This is super enlightening. I hope everybody enjoyed this as much as I did. This is something I really want to learn more and more, because I've always appreciated eating good food. I want to be part of the change of creating that good food. I don't know if I'm going to get there, but right now I'm going to hold it in my and
well, we need a lot more farmers. We need to go from 3 to 30%. So
that's a lot. That's a big increase. But I think there's a shift, right? There's a shift. People are leaving the city, and I think they are realizing, wow, we're really dependent on a lot of things. You turn a few things off and we're screwed. So to have some sustainability in there, like, I know sustainability is a low term, but just for them to be self-reliant and to also build their skill sets. Because a lot of people, you turn everything off and they're useless. They're not going to be able to last very long. So I think there is a shift that way. So hopefully we do get to that 30%. That would look a lot different. That would be amazing. But it's also decentralizing those big, massive farms, right? And creating more of those smaller family farms.
We need a family on every quarter section minimum.
Wow.
That's my goal. And we're like my colleagues and I were actively. We've got a plan to take over the world with, or at least Alberta, with that system. And we don't know how we're going to do it quite yet, but there's guys like Zach Bush that are doing it, and so there's so many amazing people. We're just getting on the ground floor. Like the stuff is taking off, and that's the real big takeaway that I hope people walk away with this from is the hope of this. Is like there's it's always darkest before the dawn.
right. The darkness needs to be revealed before the light comes through, right? And just yes, let's hold that vision. Okay, awesome, Takota. I really appreciate your time, and maybe we'll do this again one day, and I hope to visit your farm one day as well. So thank you very much.
Take care, Sasha.